To a new video series I'm starting called Forgotten Disney. Now, this series is meant to talk about a forgotten piece of media, so it could be a TV show, a movie, and examine it and see why maybe it's forgotten and maybe why it either deserves to be forgotten or deserves to be remembered. And so let's start with the Country Bears movie. Now, the Country Bear Jamboree was a attraction, I believe, at Disneyland. I never was around it. Now, by the time this movie had come around, this attraction had already shut down. So it's hard to imagine why someone thought this film would do well, because this was a dead attraction for the most part, anyways. And yeah, it wasn't around very prominently, as far as I know, anyways. Um, and so, yeah, they made this into a movie, and this was a big bomb. It was a horrific bomb. In fact, it almost killed Pirates of the Caribbean franchise before it even got off the ground. They were trying to make a lot of films based on Disney parks attractions, which we still see now. Last year, if the COVID delays had not happened, we would have gotten the Jungle Cruise movie, which is supposed to be a franchise. They're working on a Disney Plus cinematic universe related to their Disney parks of TV shows and things like that. They're still trying to revive the Pirates franchise. We see a lot of stuff based on that they're still trying to do, but a lot of the time it doesn't work. We saw that with Tomorrowland. We saw that with other things. Personally, I think it's just very difficult to make it work. And this was a bad one to start with. The Country Bears are not that popular, and this is just a bad movie. So what's this movie about? It's the typical, let's get the band back together and save the blah blah blah. That's you see this in a lot of movies. Break In and Break Into, Electric Boogaloo. The Muppets movie from 2011 had this plot. So many movies have this plot. It's this is a bad movie, and it's not a bad movie just because of the story. It's a bad movie because this movie is very, very poorly directed. It's really hard to tell what some of these scenes were going for. Like, okay, so we have this kid Barry, and he's a bear living with humans, and he's adopted, and he asks his parents if he's adopted, and he says, I don't know, my brother has freckles and I don't. And the kid's like, seriously? That's why you think you're adopted? So the dad's like, stop it, don't tell him. He's a bear. And so it's kind of this, so is that scene supposed to be funny or what? It's so poorly directed that you can't tell what scenes are going for, what the angle of scenes are. And I can tell somewhat through the performances that it's supposed to be comedic, but it doesn't work because the direction of what was going on in the scene needed to be better. Every single scene is like that. Scenes go on way too long. Editing is poor in this film. The whole movie is way too long. This is a very boring movie, and I think a lot of that has to do with the generic story, and also the Country Bears themselves are not that interesting of characters. They're just kind of boring. They're kind of old and slow. Their voices aren't that interesting. That's a weird complaint, but it's true. Like, their voices aren't that interesting because they just move kind of old and slow, except for the kid. And it's a very awkward movie. And you just see these bears walking around with humans, and there's not really any context to this. I don't know. It's just a really awkward, clunky movie based on an attraction that was dead, somewhat beloved, but also not at the same time, and this is just not a good one to turn into a movie. And I think Disney realized that after this movie bombed. It was a huge failure. It was just a disaster. So I think we're gonna on in this episode of Forgotten Disney, we're gonna give this, it deserves to be forgotten. It deserves to be forgotten. So a thumbs down on this one. I'm going to give the movie an F, a 2 out of 10, and don't watch this movie.